Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Milwaukee. Welcome to a special edition of America Decides from the final day of the Republican National Convention. For those of you who have been with us all week, thank you. For those tuning in for the first time, welcome. Let me start here. Sometimes it's hard to understand in the moment how big the strokes of history are being written around us. So I just want to pause for a second and let's think about life in America starting Saturday evening Eastern Time. Assassination attempt on the presumptive Republican nominee and a former president of the United States, preceding the first National Party convention being held in this country for 8 years. We had none in 2020 because of COVID. When that presumptive nominee and the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, arrived here, it had an electrifying, possibly galvanizing and important emotional effect on the delegates here, which could do something about the future of this presidential campaign in terms of party unity. On that very Monday, before appearing here, former President Trump named the first millennial to a presidential ticket. And tonight, when former President Trump takes the stage behind me and says the words, "I accept your nomination for President of the United States," he will do something that has never happened before in the entire history of the Republican Party. He will say those words for 3 consecutive presidential cycles. Meanwhile, while all this has been going on here in Milwaukee, the fate of President Biden's own re-election campaign appears to be hanging ever more perilously in balance, teetering. And if I'm to be honest with you, based on all the reporting here at CBS News, it feels as if that presidential campaign could tip over at any time. Not immediately, but within the next 3 or 4 days. We still do not know. History is all around us. We have been engulfed in history all this week, and the country is absorbing that history. And we have brand new polling data to express just how the country has been reacting to this welter of events. And for that, these brand new numbers, which are really important, I want to bring in Anthony Salvanto, who joins us from our studios in New York. Anthony, take it away.
Hey there, Major. So it's simply this. Donald Trump will accept the Republican nomination tonight with his largest lead of the campaign over Joe Biden so far. This polling was done entirely after the tragic events of Saturday. So this is your latest. It is 52-47. I want to put that in context in a couple of ways, Major. First, that is a shift, slight shift, but a shift nonetheless, from our numbers nationally in early July, number one. Number two, that 5 points, what does it mean in historical context, Major, since you were just talking about history? You have to go back 20 years to find the last time that a Republican nominee for president won the popular vote, and 30 years to find a Republican presidential candidate who won the national popular vote by as much more than 5 points. So that implies an electoral college advantage for sure, and that is important historically. And finally, let me just point out, Donald Trump maintains his lead in those battleground states, in those states that, at least going into this, we thought would be the closest. That's where we stand, Major.
And Anthony, I just want to drill down on something you said, but I want our audience to get a little bit more perspective on it. At no time in 2016 or 2020 was Donald Trump positioned as he is today, correct?
No, he was not. In 2020, Donald Trump trailed in poll after poll. Of course, he went on to lose the election, but Joe Biden led in state after state, Major. So that context is important, too. And I want to show you this because, like I said, this is post-assassination attempt. The impact of it is not large, right? You see 2/3 of people say it hasn't changed who they're considering voting for. However, for those who do say it's had some effect, it is net positive, more likely to consider Trump, again, for those who say it's had an effect. But let me also show you this, because I think it's important. We asked for each, for Joe Biden, for Donald Trump, has what they've said in the aftermath of Saturday's tragic events encouraged more unity in your view or more division? And a slight majority, but a majority, feel that Donald Trump has encouraged more unity. They say the same thing about President Biden, but they're registering some of that unity. You've seen that in the convention over the last couple of days. Voters are being receptive to that, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you so very much. I want to bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns, who joins me here. Caitlin, those are numbers that are of a kind we have not seen in this campaign. We did not see them in 2016. We didn't see them in 2020. Yes, Trump lost in 2020, but he narrowed the gap in the closing days of that campaign. And many battleground states were tighter than the polls suggested. My only point there is if Trump's ahead now, that has got to be startling news for Democrats.
Absolutely, and especially at a time where Republicans have just had 4 days of cheerleading around their presumptive nominee, who you mentioned will accept the nomination formally tonight. I was thinking, just 6 months ago, Donald Trump was still facing attacks from within his own party. Ron DeSantis was still challenging him for the nomination. Nikki Haley was still challenging him for the nomination. Republicans were trying to figure out their way forward, even though the inevitable would be that Donald Trump was leading there. Meanwhile, Democrats were all united around President Biden. In fact, they had structured the primaries to, make it so that he would not really have much of a challenge at all. The script has been completely flipped, and we saw kind of the completion of the Republican Party uniting around Donald Trump with that speech from Nikki Haley last night. And the nomination of Vance drawing that generational contrast last night, not only to the top of his own ticket, but to Biden at a time where yesterday he was diagnosed with COVID, has to literally sit out the campaign for a few days at least, while Donald Trump is going to take the stage, his supporters rallying behind him, but also they're hopeful, talking to lots of delegates here, that this kind of moment has the ability, if he can seize it, to reach out to those voters who may otherwise not have been inclined to him before.
At 26% in Anthony's poll that says might consider, open to.
And when you think about the margins in those battleground states.
Sure. Caitlin, I want to play for you mentioning JD Vance, the Ohio Republican senator, now on the ticket. He appeared today earlier in Milwaukee talking about something that he thinks the conservative movement, the social conservative movement, ought to give to former President Trump. Let's take a quick listen.
Remember that this is a guy who delivered for social conservatives more than any president in my 39 years of life. I think he deserves a little bit of grace, and he deserves a little bit of trust, and I hope that we will all provide that to him. I certainly know that as his running mate, I will.
Caitlin, you know the context of that as well as I do. That's about abortion in the plank and what the president does or doesn't do on that issue.
That was not anywhere mentioned last night or over the past 4 days. The conservative movement for a half century has been working to overturn Roe. Trump's big achievement, in their view, is the nomination of those 3 Supreme Court justices who did so. There has been no mention of that perceived giant achievement, decades in the making. And JD Vance especially, who has been supportive of federal limits on abortion access, who was opposed to the ballot measure.
Very hardline limits, yes.
Yes, and opposed to the ballot measure in his own state, is acknowledging, it's kind of messaging to that group, saying he supports the ticket and Donald Trump's approach that this should be left to the states, but don't worry, trust us on this. That it's kind of the nod there to those social conservatives.
Caitlin, Huey-Burns, as always, thank you so very much. I want to go now to the White House, where we can find Weijia Jiang, who can catch us up on what the effects are or aren't of President Biden's COVID diagnosis and the very state of his presidential campaign. Weij.
Well, Major, the president's doctor says that he is still experiencing mild symptoms, but he will continue to do the business of the American people as he isolates at his beach house in Delaware. But let's remember that the president on the campaign trail was supposed to be the response to his disastrous debate performance. It was supposed to be evidence for the American people that he had the stamina, the energy, the sharpness to do back-to-back events, to travel and crisscross the country and do interviews. And now all that has halted. Of course, it is a virus that has sidelined him, but for whatever the reason, this could not come at a worse time for President Biden as he tries to salvage his candidacy, because as we have been reporting and talking about here, it remains a massive question about his viability and about whether he stays in this race, especially as the campaign, the pressure campaign for him to leave continues to mount among House Democrats. In fact, we are just seeing a brand new letter from Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is an influential House Democrat, who wrote to President Biden on July 6th, we should say, and talked about how much the president loves this country. And because of that, he should think about stepping aside. He said there is no shame in taking a bow when your arm is tired, making a baseball reference, and saying that, you should caucus with the rest of your team, Mr. President. And I expect, Major, that the longer this goes on, the more we'll see these public calls for him to drop out, when in private they have already been happening for quite some time now. And so it's difficult to see the path forward for the president, but we need to be very, very clear that it is the president who is driving that boat or whatever vehicle you want to use. He is the one in charge. He is the one who will ultimately decide what happens to him, because he is the only one who can release the delegates that he earned in the primary. So until he gets to that decision, we just have to wait and see.
With the latest on COVID and the future of the Biden campaign, Weijia Jiang on the North Lawn of the White House. Thank you very much.